Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture Albion Never Dies, the podcast which now has a website, albionneverdies.com. Today, I'm joined by Alex Lamas, and we talk about the trailer for the forthcoming James Bond video game, First Light. Currently a martial arts instructor, Alex Lamas was in the film business for 25 years, working as a storyboard artist, assistant art director, and weapons specialist. He's not a gamer. He played Goldeneye N64 only twice in the 1990s, and he gives me, I'm a strictly casual gamer by the way, he gives me a cinephile's view on the new video game trailer. Before we recorded this episode, I played Hitman 2 for a few hours. That's relevant because these are the same people working on the new 007 game. I've put in many more hours now, and the statements in the interview are still absolutely true. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Okay, recording in progress. Alex Lamas, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I had a theory which you have destroyed quite happily, which is that the video game trailer First Light came out recently, the James Bond video game. Most people who liked it were people who play games, and most people who didn't like it were people who don't play games. And then there's you.
Well, there's also an age thing as well. You know, I noticed a lot of the younger people maybe have liked it and were more appreciative of it. Some of the older people, I know, like Joe Darlington, was like, "Oh, that's not James Bond."
Yeah.
It was kind of being the old man. That's not what James Bond's supposed to be. I am 58 years old, and I grew up mostly on Sean Connery, and then a little bit later Roger Moore. But I saw the Connery ones first on television, and yeah, I'm like, maybe I'm an outlier. I don't know. I saw that trailer and I loved it, and I don't play games. I'm not a gamer. I played Goldeneye twice. In my entire life.
Okay.
Back in the 90s, that was it. My brother had it. I played it. My brother is a gamer. I played his video games maybe once or twice, and even back in the 80s when we would, like, after school, I went to school in New York City. After school, we would go down to Times Square. They had a big video arcade place called Fantasia. And we would go hang out there for the afternoon, rest of the afternoon, several hours playing video games. I spent most of the time watching my friends playing video games. I didn't actually, I'd play a couple here and there, but it was never something that I was really gravitated towards that much, video games. I don't know. No reason, just didn't grab me in the same way it grabbed other people. And, I wanted to do all those things for real.
Fair enough.
So when I saw the Hitman video game, to me, I was looking at it from a cinematic perspective. I had been in like we were talking before, I'd been in the film business for 25 years. I made movies. I've been on sets, so movies to me, I went to high school, to the High School of Art and Design for filmmaking. I went to college for filmmaking. I've been in the film business for 25 years. So I'm looking at it from a purely cinematic perspective. And, if I just sort of adjust my perspective from the digital image of these characters to seeing them as actual human beings, I translate it into, like, I want to see this movie.
Okay. Yeah.
To me, it was like, I want to see this film. This looks like a great movie. This looks like a great cinematic experience. And even the Bond, the way he looked and the way he acted, I was totally enthralled. He came off, younger, yes, but I loved, he had kind of a cocky swagger about him, where I could imagine an early Bond kind of being full of himself.
Yeah.
Kind of like
a George Lazenby style.
Yeah, kind of like a George Lazenby style, where he's kind of like a little bit, cocky and conceited, and maybe a little bit full of himself. He's coming out of the SAS or SBS or naval intelligence, wherever he comes out of, and just being like, oh, I'm a 00 now. I'm hot. Excuse my language.
There'll be a bleep. It's fine.
you know.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
liked that. I liked that type of James Bond, and it reminded me a lot of the books.
Yeah.
Because if you go back into the Fleming, one of the things that I did that I absolutely so happy of. I'm dyslexic, so I don't really read that much. But during lockdown, David Zaritsky had his Fleming reading challenge, and I took it
Mm.
on and I started reading the books. And luckily, they were reading them very slowly, so I could keep up. It took a long time between he took a long time between books, and so I was able to keep up and actually read the books, read the Fleming novels. And I think I only did two audiobooks, but the rest I actually, read. And I was very shocked how different Bond is in the books
Mm.
than he is on film. In the books, he's a much more three-dimensional character. He has self-doubt. He actually doesn't like killing. He
Mm.
doesn't like, he only has, his romantic involvements are a lot more simpler. He sometimes doesn't get the girl. He was almost like a real person in the books. And, he wasn't that superhero that you see in the films that comes off in the movies. He was an actual, almost relatable human being. Where I can see where Dalton and Craig, gravitated towards that Bond more than the more superhero Bond of Connery and Brosnan and Roger Moore.
Yeah.
Not that they're not great. I love those Bonds, but just a different interpretation. So I could see how in the video game when he was coming off kind of cocky and full of himself, I could see him making mistakes. I
Mm.
could see him tripping him over himself because he's too, he may be a little too arrogant to realize he might not know everything. And I liked that. I liked that. I liked the way he came off, and I liked the way he kind of had that kind of cocky swagger in the video game trailer.
Mm.
And yeah, so I was enthralled.
And there's lots of little details. We have the scar on the face, which we've never had in the
Yeah,
films. It's
yeah, yeah. And he's not dressing, totally, he's not the snappy, snazzy dresser he is just yet,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So it's not quite an origin story, but it's like, the middle towards the end of the origin story kind of
Mm.
idea. I think that's what I kind of gleaned from that this isn't an origin story, but this is early Bond. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
still, young Bond, early Bond. He's, a newly, like Craig in Casino Royale, he's a newly formed double O
Mm.
and just trying to figure it all out. And so it was cool. And then just the action scenes and some of the tropes and everything. It was just, I thought it was extremely James Bond. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
I felt it. I don't know how did you feel it? How did you see it?
Well, it made me think when, first of all, I saw all the book references, which made me
Hmm.
very, very happy. But it made me think of
Yeah.
when they were making Casino Royale, the rumor was they were choosing between two possibilities, either a right age actor who was unconventional looking, or someone very, very conventional but too young. So Henry
Mm-hmm.
Cavill was the name floated. And it looked
Mm-hmm.
like they were almost coming at that and making the different decision, right? So somebody very conventional looking, but very young. Uh,
Yeah.
so I felt it's almost like another go at something very
Yeah.
similar to Casino Royale, which is not
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing. It's been a long time since Casino Royale.
Yeah. 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 It's going to be 20 years.
Yeah, I was thinking that because I was like,
Oh,
who plays these games? And it's like 15 to 25 is like the golden age for that. So they weren't even
yeah.
born when Casino Royale
Yeah.
came out, right? For them, it's an ancient film.
Just thinking about that, you're just making me, you're just breaking my heart.
Oh, oh,
Like, oh, I'm an old man.
oh, oh.
You're an old man.
But you don't look it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm
Thank
not the
you.
first to say. You said you're aging, like, really? But
Clean living and a lot of olive oil.
I'm also curious because you've worked in the film industry, and I'd say a lot of creatives have moved over to games, right? The video game industry is bigger now than the film
Huge,
industry.
massive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's where most people or most young, most of this generation and even the previous generation is getting their entertainment from.
Mm.
So, it's, and if it's good, okay, I'm not going to play it, but I'm happy. I'm happy because it's also bringing another generation in. If you
Mm.
don't bring another generation in, it's going to die.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If you don't get young people interested in this in any way, it will cease to be.
Yeah.
I'm a big Formula One fan, and I've been a big Formula One fan since I was a kid. And, but I've seen the old guard to the new guard, from the old Formula One of Bernie Eccleston to the new one of Liberty Media. And I remember when that changeover happened, all the old Formula One fans were like, "Oh, the Americans are going to ruin it. Formula One's going to die. This is the end of Formula One. It's not going to ever be the same." Right now, Formula One's one of the most popular sports in the world.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why was because in the old guard, when Bernie Eccleston was running, he didn't allow the drivers to go on social media.
Mm.
That was forbidden. And as soon as Liberty took over, they were allowed to do as much social media as they wanted. And they were encouraged to do social media. This was even before Drive to Survive on Netflix. So it allowed a huge amount of young people to come into the sport. And not only that, it allowed a lot of young women to come into the sport, because they're looking at these, I'm sorry, but if you look at the Formula One drivers, they're all really good looking young guys.
Yeah.
they're all extreme. They look like, some of them look like models, like George Russell.
Top athletes, including drivers, tend to be attractive,
George Russell looks like Jude Law's better looking brother. And now Formula One has like an almost like a 48% female audience, which was unheard of for any motorsport, let alone F1. It was unheard of. Maybe it was like 12% female relation. Now it's almost 50. So, and that was all due to social media and the gaming and everything. And gaming brought in a lot of young fans into Formula One. So gaming bringing a lot of fans into James Bond is the way to go. It's how you will they'll go from the game to the movie the same way Goldeneye brought in a lot of, brought in your generation, I would say.
Yeah, I was the one who's left behind. But yeah, so I was the one who wasn't interested in the Polygon era of games. But lots of my friends were, so they were all talking about it.
Okay.
And then I ended up reading the Bond books in university, and that's how I got in. So it's actually recent games that have really got me into it. So I play games now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. But a lot of, you're how old? I'm sorry.
I am 40.
40. So I would think you would be considered the GoldenEye generation, right?
Yeah. I just happen to be an odd outlier because I remember other people playing it.
Right.
And I must have had a go a few times. Oddly enough, in my case, a brother's console, but for me, it's an older brother. I believe it's a younger brother. So But yeah, Polygons I couldn't get on board with. Once I played Skyrim, so that came out 2011. I must have played a few years later. For me, they call it the Citizen Kane of video games, because the first time you played the game, and what you really remembered was the characters. You remember the stories. Like before, it might be action or the engagement of the players, but suddenly you had like a mythos to go with. So for me, that became a real turning point in how I thought about games.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm all for it. I don't have to play it, but I'm glad they're doing it. I'm so happy they're doing it. And for what I saw, like I said, if that was a movie, I would go see that movie. That was great. And some of them were thinking, oh, they're using the Under Majesty's music again. I loved it. When that music plays, I get goosebumps. I get chills.
Yeah.
When I heard the music in that game, I was like, oh, I wish I was a gamer. I'd be on this.
Still time.
No, I'm not that interested in it.
There's a British granny who's quite famous online for playing Grand Theft Auto and live streaming as she hunts down. Are you the man from British Gas? Are you the one sending me the bills? So
that's funny. That's hilarious. No, I was always a cinephile. Even as a little kid, I was always into movies, and that's where my passion that lies is into the cinema and film. So
but I have to confirm something you said previously, because you said people who played video games that were about Formula One got into Formula One. Now I know very little about Formula One, But the little I largely know from playing Forza, the video game. So everything I've learned about racing rarely is from games.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
I see a real one. I'm like, oh, I've played the game of this. And so it gets
yeah,
me
yeah,
into it.
yeah. It's it. I great, absolutely great, fantastic.
Mm.
And again, I'm all for it. And I think if it can bring another generation, if it can spark more people to get into this, whatever however you get in,
Yeah.
that's a magnificent thing. So yeah, so I'm not one of those. I might be older, but I'm not one of those old curmudgeons like, oh, that's not James Bond. No, that was a very to me. I saw, and especially after reading the novels, that
Mm.
was a very James Bond trailer that I took from my perspective. That was very James Bond, all
Oh,
of it.
fantastic.
And again, the character that they had playing James Bond, I thought was
Mm.
yeah. I personally, I'm hoping that it's a big success, and I'm hoping that the people that are, because I know that Eon did the game. That was
Mm.
purely an Eon, because this game was being developed years ago. And so I'm hoping that the new people are looking at this game and saying, yeah, maybe we should use this game as sort of the way to go, and that kind of character the way to go. Because if they do that, I think they got a winner.
Oh, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
know from another franchise. So Star Wars, the TV shows have been fairly mixed, the films
Hmm.
hits and misses,
Hmm.
but the
Hmm.
video games have been on point. And
Oh yeah.
that
Okay.
has an actor, live action, who's
Hmm.
mocapped and all that.
All
And
right.
there's been a move for years to try and get him into one of these big TV shows, into his own movies, things like that. So
Hmm.
there are online movements for this kind of
Hmm.
thing. So
Okay.
a few comments were saying about this young man playing Bond in the video game. Could he sign a 20-year contract? Could he be the face of Bond for the next 20 years? If it's successful, would he then become the cinema Bond?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll leave that up to the powers that be. But it was more, the kind of choice of making him kind of an arrogant, cocky young guy. And I thought again, if you read the early Bond novels, he's that in the
Yeah.
first, in Casino and Live and Let Die, Moonraker. He's and as he gets, as the books go on, he gets a little more. There's a lot more weight to him.
Yeah.
He gets weighed down and beaten up and has kind of a grim. The books have a kind of a
They're quite grim
turn
towards the
towards a
end. Yeah.
dark turn pretty dark towards the end.
And those are
So
my favorite ones. I don't know what it says about me, but I
yeah, you
absolutely
loved
love the endings.
you loved the Man with the Golden Gun book.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I loved You Only Live Twice book.
Mm.
I thought that book was spectacular, beautifully written, but it is heavy. It's a heavy book. It's got some heavy things going on in there. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not a romp.
No, it's no relation to the film, really.
No, but it's a great book, and I love the movie, but I love the book
Mm.
a lot more
Yeah.
in that sense. This could
The
go
man with
into another tangent.
Sure, but for me, it's always the
That
shock. The Man with the Golden Gun. The first time I read it, I was so shocked because I absolutely love the movie.
Mhm.
It's so fun. The
So
book
different.
is completely different, and I also
It's
love it.
much darker. Yeah, it's much darker.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
occupy two very different places in my mind.
yeah. And I actually my only thing is I wish they did more of in the book. I wish they did more of, because he comes back brainwashed when he tries
Yes.
to kill M. I wish they kind of carried that further. That was an interesting way to go.
Mm,
And okay, so he makes the attempt on M's life, and then they deprogram him, and that's the end of that. But no, I was like, no, I wish that would have been more interesting story too, if they did that in Die Another Day. Maybe if they kind of played with that idea a lot more. Has he been bent, or has he not been bent? I don't
mm.
know. We don't know. That would have missed opportunity there
Yeah,
on
James
Ian
Bond doesn't have
Fleming and the
nightmares
film.
about this.
No, but that'd be cool if he did.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. But we've had
it
the
would
heavy
be.
time of Daniel Craig, and it seems we're getting something a bit lighter and a bit more
Yeah, no,
fun
I'm
now.
I'm I'm with everybody. I think we've had our existential angst with Daniel Craig. I love the films. I love Daniel Craig. I love all the movies. I love more than than others, but I'm a big Daniel Craig fan. I'm a big fan of the whole arc and everything from beginning to end. I do not, but yeah, it's time to have some fun again, definitely. Yeah. And this video, I mean, this trailer for the video game, that's the tone that I'm hoping they have, because that tone was also very playful, very fun, very like, let's just jazz it up and have a real great action adventure good time, and still keep it keep it edgy, keep it somewhat violent, but also have that tone is what I'm hoping for. I love the Craig films. I loved all of them. Casino Royale is my #1 favorite Bond film. Skyfall is in the top 5 of my favorites. But yeah, we need to have fun. We need to bring a little bit of Brosnan more back into it. Not too much. I don't want to get silly again.
Okay.
But a little bit, sort of like, have a balance between, my favorite Bond was Dalton. He's my favorite.
Okay.
I think he had a good balance of dark and light, fun and ruthlessness, which I think was good. So,
I always think one of the best things about Bond is you can go from Moonraker to License to Kill. Right, you've got that complete range.
That's a huge leap, though.
It is.
Yes, you could.
It
but
is.
It's kind of like it's a real. That's a big leap to make. The nice thing about Bond is that you can have any Bond that you like. Some people love the more silly, more flamboyant Roger Moore version. Some people look. I like the slightly more darker, harder edge Daniel Craig Dalton ones. There's a Bond for everybody.
Yeah,
that's the nice thing.
I can tell you, in preparation for the camp, what am I going to say about this new game? I knew this is the same studio that made the Hitman games. They're famous. I hadn't played them. I asked my top video game expert what he thought of them. He said, that's the one I haven't got round to.
And now Lashif is in one of them.
Yes, yeah, and it fits. So I've been playing Hitman 2 I've played it for a few hours, and it's got the playfulness you mentioned. It does have the dark grittiness. Lashif would fit in perfectly. The first real mission after basically the pre-title sequence, you can, although you don't have to, you can wear a disguise, and the disguise at a Formula One race, and you can dress as one of the mascots. So you play.
They don't have masks. They don't have mascots in F1.
Some kind of mascot for some kind of company.
Really?
Maybe it's one of the sponsors. So you can basically dress as a giant flamingo, goodness knows what. But it's the scary hitman who is tough in a flamingo kind of outfit. It kind of reminded me of Octopussy, to be honest. But it carries it well. Yeah, kind of like the clown suit. So he's basically wandering around in a clown suit. But it's still quite dark. It's still quite implausible, but possible.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I think the best part of the, from what I gleaned from the trailer of the video game, is they got the tone perfect.
Yeah.
It was dark, it was edgy, but it was also playful and had that kind of swagger that we want from James Bond. James Bond is the glamour spy, and that's what we want. We want some of the glamour spy. Ethan Hunt is the action guy. Jason Bourne's the fighter. And Bond is the glamour. Blonde. Johnny English is the goofy one. Sometimes Roger Moore is. I'm gonna get hate for that. I'm a fan of The Saint. I'm sorry. Yeah. I grew up on Simon Templar. When I first saw Roger Moore in the first time I saw Roger Moore was in a great film, one of my favorites, The Spy Who Loved Me. But my first reaction was, that's not James Bond. That's the infamous Simon Templar.
See, I had it the other way around, right? So I know him as Bond, and I started watching The Saint. And I'm like, it's like bonus episodes of The Man with the Golden Gun, because he plays it so much like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
almost
loved it.
The same character. He plays it almost exactly the same. But that was the problem with me because when I was a little kid growing up in the 70s, they would play the reruns of The Saint all the time, constantly. And
Mm.
I don't know why a little 6, 7, 8 year old would be hooked on Simon Templar, but I was enthralled. I loved it. That was my favorite TV show when I was a little kid. I don't know why I was a weird kid, but it was literally my number one favorite TV show as a kid was that and Kung Fu and with David Carradine and two
Oh,
very different films, but yeah,
yes.
shows. But those were I was completely. I would draw the Saint caricature, the stick figure, on drawers, on walls, on everything. My mom would open a drawer and see it. Alex, what are you doing? Stop drawing! Because she know where I would be. You'd open a cabinet and there it was.
I
So
hope.
I was obsessed with the Saint when I was a little kid. But I saw Connery Bond first.
Mm.
I saw Thunderball was the first film my father showed it to me, and then I saw You Only Live Twice, and then Goldfinger, and then From Russia with Love. Those were the first, and then I saw Roger Moore, and I was like, "This is Simon Templar."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that so it was, that was my personal relationship with Bond and the Saint.
I have to ask, have you asked Roland Hume about the Saint or
Oh, we talk about it all the time. Oh no, Roland and I were always talking about this. He gave me some of the books. I read a couple of the books. Yeah, no, we definitely vibe on the Saint with Roland and I.
I can
That's the
confirm
first place we
I've now
go.
read the books because he told me to read the books. He's
Yeah,
got me to
me
read them.
too. Yeah, same here. Same here.
He's doing well. He's
So
doing well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was good.
Okay, brilliant. After all, is there anything else that you noticed in the trailer that you'd like to talk about?
Talked about the the DBS. That was cool.
Yes.
They didn't use the I guess maybe the DB5 is a bit cliche now. So what are we going to use? Oh, let's use on Her Majesty's Secret Service the Aston Martin DBS,
Hmm.
which was great, and it was weird because it was the DBS from the Persuaders of all
Yes.
things. It had that color from the Persuaders, so that's a little bit of there's a deep cut Easter egg there.
I do. To be honest, I really liked that because, yeah,
Oh, I thought
I
it was
do feel the
cool.
DB5
Yeah,
is really overdone. Because, yeah, I mean, Connery
yeah.
has it in what, a couple of films, and then it becomes so overdone so
Yeah,
many years
yeah,
later.
yeah. So I love the
Um,
fact that they use the DBS, and yeah, I don't know. I just that's
yeah.
yeah. I love mostly. I love the tone. I
Mm,
think they got the tone perfect. And
yeah.
I'm really hoping the film has that same, kind of tone
Mm,
that they have is this, you know, young cocky swagger and but really, dark and not too dark, but
yeah.
brutal.
It
You
needs that
know,
harder edge, but
yeah, hard, edgy, not too. Give it some edge.
I'm,
Make me believe that he could kill somebody
yeah.
and not worry about it too much.
I am curious because you've worked in film, right? Film is collaborative, creative, and setting a universal, like a cohesive tone is a
Hmm.
tough job, right? In
It
one
is.
creative work with one person, let alone a great
It is, and it doesn't
collaborative
always work,
effort.
and you don't always know if you're going to get it right,
Mm,
And when you're making a movie and then putting the film together, it's very difficult whether you're going to get that, to really manufacture that tone correctly.
mm,
A lot of times when films fail, it's because they have in mind one film, but they put down onto the put down another film on film, so
yeah.
to speak, and they don't always. And there was some sort of cognitive dissonance that goes on where it just doesn't quite match up, and that's when you have where films don't feel right, and then some actors are doing in one film and another actors are in another film, even though they're in the same film, their
Yeah.
behavior is different, and so it's a tricky thing to get it to get a tone correct.
Mm,
And it really depends mostly on the director and mostly on the director, the editor, and the star,
yeah.
whoever is carrying the picture. Whoever is the main protagonist. So if the main protagonist has sets the tone, and the director knows they're on the same level, then it doesn't matter what the script says. It doesn't matter how the editing. You might get there.
Yeah.
But if the main actor protagonist is on one thing and the director's trying to do something else, and they're not quite in sync, then yeah, that's where you're going to have problems, and that's where things go wrong a lot of the time. So it's very important that the director and the main actors are on the same level of what they're doing.
How would you say that's best communicated between them, just on your observation?
Oh, it's really done with the relationship between the director and the actors.
Okay.
What kind of relationship do the director and the actors have, and how much have they discussed, and how much have they really, are in sync with one another and what they're thinking and feeling. Again, a lot. It's so collaborative, so it's more of an intuitive thing. It's not something that can be, controlled unless you have a director that has so much control and is so tightly, like Stanley Kubrick, who had massive amount of control over his films, and he would take something 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 times, and take until he got it just right.
Yeah.
Or Christopher Nolan, he has, as great a director it is, he has a very limited range in terms of tone. His films are almost the same tone in every film. So when you're going into Christopher Nolan film, if you're the actor, you're like, okay, I got it. This is what he's going to do. I already know.
Yeah.
So then it's actually easy for him, because he's sort of, he has his style, and then you have to adjust yourself to that.
Yeah. If you're writing for Mills and Boon, you're writing for Mills and Boon.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who Mills and Boon is.
They publish romantic novels here in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
But they're a stable. There's one a month. They come out.
Yeah,
I don't know if one a month, but anyway.
But they have what you're getting.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting with that. Yeah. So there's certain directors.
If you want to know what to do, watch the previous 10.
Yeah, exactly. You know what you're getting. And then the other directors are kind of can change their tones, like Spielberg. He can do a comedy. He can do this. He can do that. He can do it dark. He can do it light. He'll adjust himself to the material.
Yeah.
So it depends. They'll. But getting that right, going into it, and knowing when you go into it, what is the tone of this film, and what kind of movie are we making, and if everybody's on board making the same film, and the director. I think that's where, where Quantum got it right was that they were both on the same page, the director and Craig. Where they got it right was they knew what they were making. So, I mean, I personally love Quantum of Solace, and I thought it was, I see it as Act 4 to Casino Royale. And when you see it as it is not a complete film, I understand, by any means. But if you see it as Act 4 to Casino Royale, it actually is a great film, and there's a lot there. And I think where it works is that the director and Craig were on the same page when they were making the movie. They knew what kind of film they were making. It may be not to be everybody's taste, but it was what it was. It was that was where they were going with it, and that's what they wanted to make, and that was good. I think where No Time to Die may have had problems, or no, I would say actually more Spectre. Where Spectre had problems is because they were not. I don't think they were on the same page. They were kind of trying to balance light and dark and fun and pathos, and I don't think they knew exactly what tone to make it, because on the one hand they wanted to make a classic Bond film with big sets and a big villain and and swagger and this and that. On the other side, they were also trying to stay more to like that dark edge of some of the previous Craig films. Like they're coming off of Skyfall, which was very dark and had that real pathos to it. And so I don't think they were in sync as much in Spectre. And I think that's where Spectre went wrong. They didn't know what where the tone was supposed to be. Because sometimes it was like a classic Bond, Connery Moore film, big and flamboyant, and sometimes it was like Quantum or a darker film, and it was like, well, what do you got? What are we doing? I don't know.
Yeah, pick a lane, I think is the
pick a lane, and they were kind of weaving in and out of that lane, and that's where the problems were.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
But everything to look forward to.
Yep.
Okay, Alex, thank you very, very much for joining me. I think we're running.
Can I say it's been an honor and a pleasure and a privilege finally being on one of your podcasts. And
delighted.
Can I also say it's about time. We've been talking for years. I'm watching this thing. I'm seeing everybody I know on your show. And I'm like, what am I, chopped liver?
You get me personally and face to face.
Well, I should hope so. We've been talking for years. We've had lunch together. We've hung out together. And finally, I get to be on your podcast,
on your number one topic, video games,
which I never play.
Perfect.
It's been wonderful, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.